good morning, good afternoon, and good evening if you're connecting from Asia. I'm very pleased to welcome you to another session of our Hydropower Knowledge series. This time we're going to be talking about pumped storage hydropower, which is, of course, one of the oldest and well-proven technologies on storing electricity in systems. And in the World Bank, we have been involved in a number of storage hydropower projects throughout the years. We actually right now have one going on that we're working with the government of Indonesia, with PLN. And we clearly see that as power systems move more towards clean energy, as we incorporate more renewables, wind and solar, which are more variable in their outputs, the importance of storage in the systems and the importance of hydropower storage keeps on growing. So very happy that we will be focusing on this today, and a big thanks to our colleagues from external organizations that are joining us, and from the International Hydropower Association and from Hydro Tasmania to share with us their experience and what has worked well for them and what is it that we need to be focused on as we undertake these projects. So with this, let me pass it on back to you, Bente, to take us forward.
Thank you so much, Dimitris, and thank you so much for the good opening remarks. To begin, I think that we are going to have a quick look at the agenda. Following this, I will give a presentation from the World Bank Group on how we support our clients to create an enabling environment and also to address the challenges with policy and creating a regulatory framework. Matteo Bianciotto from IHA will then also follow this with a presentation on how they work and have created a policy toolkit. And after that, we will have a panel discussion with our good colleagues from Hydro Tasmania and Sarawak Energy, Colin Wayne and Tony Thing Tu Huang. We will have an audience Q&A, so we would like to encourage everyone to raise the questions in the chat while this webinar is going on, and then we will wrap it up with some closing remarks from Jessica Kersey. First, a bit of housekeeping. The webinar is recorded and it will be made available on our ESMAP website after this event. Please post your questions, and then we will also post some other useful links in the chat as we move through. So now I would like to kick us off and start with a presentation on how we work with policy and regulatory framework from the World Bank Group. As we know, hydropower is key for reliable and sustainable energy access. So I think that we are going to see that I think we all appreciate that it's affordable access to affordable, secure electricity. And then we can click through and it unlocks clean power. And then I think I would like the next slide, Rebecca, so we can focus there. So from our perspective, we worked with supporting our clients as we understand the risk. We all recognize developing hydropower can have significant social and environmental implications, including community displacement, ecosystem, and biodiversity impacts. But we are also committed to tackling these. So we bring long-term and deep country knowledge to address these big pictures. We also work to support our clients through all different phases when developing hydropower. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So this brings us to where we focus on removing barriers. We usually follow two different tracks when we try to structure our engagements. So we start often with the policy and sector support. This spans from early planning, regulatory institutional capacity building. We go through also these least cost energy sector planning. We assist with market demands, a pre-feasibility study, and we also have support for capacity building and ENS activities and so on. We also continue from there often to project level support, where after these initial phases is usually identified a project that our clients would like more support to continue to develop. But in this process, and to be able to get there, we have identified a set of common barriers that we see that our clients are facing around the globe. Next, please. These spans from governance risk, environmental and social risk, and technical risk and financial risk. The governance risk and the early stage risks are what we will focus a bit more on today. I think that many of you are familiar with these types of risk, and it's often something that can cause a bit of delays, and it can also slow down the progress in the beginning of these development stages, so that addressing these risks at an early stage will enable you to propel and progress with your projects. Next, please. So as we will focus on today is that the lack of a regulatory framework and its enforcement is key. This can bring us through to a broader sectoral engagement actions for low and middle income countries. We support and we also encourage them to establish and implement transparent methodology for licensing, and also to set up a revenue requirements for power sector companies. This can be brought further down to doing the same and set up these arrangements for hydropower projects themselves. And that can bring you to a project-specific actions by the different countries. And these early phase policy developments and regulatory frameworks can then be brought down to specific contracts where we have several models that we can support our clients to use. Next, please. I'm going to briefly show you these also different barriers, as they often come at a bit later stage in the development. But as we try to demonstrate here is that the World Bank Group support really spans from any early stage support through project planning, preparation, design, construction, and then also to completion and commissioning of the project. And with that, I think I would like then to hand it over to Matteo Bianciotto from IHA, and that he can also talk about how they address these challenges from their perspective.
Thank you very much, Bente. And thank you very much also for inviting me to be here with you today to discuss this very important topic. If we can just move forward with the slide.
Matteo, I think that we can't hear you.
You cannot hear me? I can't see the signal coming through. Is it still, you cannot hear me? Okay, this is bizarre. It was working a moment ago. I see the chat says that they can hear me.
Sorry, I think that we still can't hear you. It'd be really good if you can try and connect your...
I think the chat says you can hear me well, so...
We can hear him. Bente, maybe it's on your end.
Okay, so it seems that it's only...
on your end somehow.
Please continue, Matteo, and I'll try to sort out my challenge.
It's a strange circumstance, I agree. Quite unusual, but Okay, thank you very much again. I was just saying thank you, Bente, for inviting me to be here today with this important conversation. I just wanted to start with the slides that taken from our World Hydropower Outlook. The International Hydropower Association every year monitors the development of what we call the pipeline, so the projects that are undergoing. On the left-hand side, you can see the pipeline of projects that are at the moment under development for run-of-river and reservoir hydropower. On the right-hand side, you can see the pipeline for pump storage currently being developed. The first good news is that this demonstrates the relevance of these technologies. The pipeline is almost equal, so we speak about over 500 gigawatt of pump storage currently under development. But a striking point out of this pipeline is that at the moment we still see this pipeline to be heavily shifted towards certain region and not equally distributed, or even I would say, throughout the various phases of the project. We believe there's several barriers that persist, and some of these are really specific to pump storage. And most importantly, as you mentioned, most of these barriers are linked to the regulatory framework in which pump storage is developed, and governments can play a role to that end. So maybe if you can move to the next slide, please. This is a short list of barriers that IHA have identified looking and observing the development of this project globally, which often negatively impact the development of pump storage and the moving forward the pump storage pipeline. Barrier impacts project developments through their entire development cycle, from planning and modeling and long-term, and the lack of long-term national plans, for instance. We going also through the complex permitting and pump storage needs to navigate. We also know that the securing finance is not an easy element in these large infrastructure. These are complex business. Pump storage is a complex business model, which often is linked also to long payback period and high capital requirements. Last but not least, I also identified that the way storage is classified can often constitute a barrier to the end impact, and because it negatively impact the economics of the project. And this is again an area where governments and regulators can play a significant role. Without focusing too much on the barrier, we prepared, can we move to the next slide, please? With IHA in 2025, we produced a policy toolkit, a policy framework for pump storage, the hydropower developments. This is a set of good practices that we have identified, looking again at the development of this sector globally, and identify areas where government can act and take action to facilitate the development of new projects and create a stronger pipeline, healthier pipeline in their countries. I go quickly through these 6 key areas in the following slides. Please move. Thank you very much. So point number 1, we really call for governments to, first of all, proactively plan their future electricity power system, and really carefully assessing, I would say, the need for storage. This long-term planning, which is really needed, and it's the kickoff point of any healthy infrastructure and power system, is not only useful to build resilience and energy security over time, but it's also a necessary step to provide the developers and investors the necessary confidence that there is a political commitment to deliver these infrastructures. These plans basically show strong political signals and reduce the perceived political risk and provide regulatory stability that is needed to see and perceived by developers. We therefore say always as policy solution and action we've seen globally, we suggest to carry out models and plans for electricity storage flexibility. We incentivize government in these plans to consider both short and long-term electricity storage needs separately, and also set national target for electricity storage, including and really trying to highlight and carve out in this strategy what is the expected contribution for pump storage on the long run. If we move to the next slide, please. We also see really positive aspect when governments act in support, as an important action the governments can take, the fact that they should try to support the identification process of the appropriate site for pump storage development. Governments can accelerate the development of a solid local pumped storage pipeline by supporting pre-feasibility studies, conducting mapping exercise, and pre-selecting the most economically viable and technically advantageous sites. We therefore invite government to integrate pumped storage development into their broader energy system planning and also to consider establishing development funds. Move forward to the next slides. Another very important element that it's an action that we have seen happening around the globe and that always have triggered significant positive impact on the development of local pipelines is the development of fit-for-purpose permitting procedures, which include also environmental and social governance aspect. Obviously, pumped storage is a complex infrastructure, but inefficient and non-transparent permitting process can really further expand and delay the development period and the payback time for this project. Governments can create, act and create efficient permitting process for pumped storage development with clear timelines, with really clear timelines, making sure the developers know in advance what the timeline might look like, which also ensure environmental and sustainability good practices. We also urge government to make sure that the administrative bodies that will have to judge this project are well staffed and sufficiently staffed with expert resources. I underline the importance of capacity buildings, also the ESMAP and the World Bank are conducting, because this will increase the efficiency of the overall evaluation process. If we move to the next slide, please. A fourth action we identified is to implement mechanisms that provide the necessary revenue visibility over an adequate period. I'm sure we'll discuss more about this during this webinar today, but we cannot stop stressing the fact that obviously pumped storage is an asset with very high capex, extreme long payback time, and therefore the combination of these two elements create complexities for developers and finance providers. Part of this risk can be absorbed or mitigated through government actions. In regulated electricity markets, the creation of dedicated fees that are applicable to pumped storage and thought in order to feed the operation of pumped storage obviously is necessary step, but also in liberalized market, implementation of revenue stabilization mechanisms such as like cap and floor and capacity market to reduce the merchant risk are providing success and showing that the industry react. Also, it's important to design this instrument, taking into consideration the long payback period of these infrastructures. We often see capacity mechanisms being developed to support renewable energy development, and these capacity mechanisms, for instance, are designed for 5 years period. This is not adequate for pumped storage. This will not help hydropower infrastructure, and this therefore the timeline of this instrument need to be adequately set in order to support and consider the specificity of hydropower and pumped storage. Also, for instance, the introduction of tax incentive to reduce project credit risk. Can we please go to the next slide? Another important action is to recognize the holistic role of pumped storage and reward not only the energy service, but also make sure that the water and societal services provided by pumped storage are considered. It's all about revenue stacking, increasing the bankability of a project, is making sure that all the various benefits and services that a pumped storage plant is going to provide will be compensated. We solicitate governments to take action in order to introduce parameters that holistically value the benefits provided by pumped storage from an energy system, but also to society. In any evaluation process, so when you're evaluating process, make sure you consider all the various elements and all the benefits that these plants and this project can provide. And this also is valid when we're comparing technologies. The comparison needs to be carried out on a sufficiently long lifespan that capture all the work that pumped storage plant can deliver. And again, when we see this happening, we can observe a fair market. We can also observe that pumped storage is facilitated and chosen and priced versus other technologies. Also implement legal framework that properly classifies, as I said before, energy storage asset, considering the double role that they have as a generator and a consumer, and will avoid hurdling process and reducing the economic of this process because of double taxation or fees. Last but not least, last slide, and I will finish here, is again going back to the revenue stackability. Make sure we remunerate ancillary services. Procure and remunerate all these services, all the ancillary services that the pump storage plant can provide. Plan for them in advance. So in national planning, don't only consider your energy needs, but also consider your stability needs and flexibility needs. And make sure that the tariff and the price capture by this asset when providing this flexibility is sufficient to pay for the cost incurred, because flexibility comes with a cost, and the value effectively the service provided to the system. This is all from my side. You will find all these scanning the QR code you have seen here on this PowerPoint. There will be more online, obviously, and IHA will keep obviously updating this policy toolkit regularly over time.
Thank you so much, Matteo. And now we are moving over to our panel discussion, and I would also like to welcome Colin Wayne, who is the Policy Development Manager at Hydro Tasmania, and Tony Thing Wong, who is the Senior Management in Sarawak Energy Bearhead, and we will also continue to have Matteo with us. So, Tony, I think that we will start with you, because currently energy generation in Sarawak stands at 6 gigawatt. And you are targeting 10 gigawatt installed capacity by 2030 and increasing that further to 15 by 2035. One of the reasons that you have informed us about this is are aiming for this because we expect more solar in the system, including floating solar, to realize these targets. And we also understand that you are seeking to develop pumped storage hydropower, as it is critical to support the solar in your power system. So how would you describe the current policy environment in Malaysia and Sarawak? And what elements of the current framework are enabling the development of pumped storage hydropower, such as Bakun, which is a 2,400 megawatt pump storage project, and Murum at 944 megawatt that we are aware that you have in your plans?
All right, thank you, Bendy. The National Energy Transition Roadmap, next slide.
Next slide, Rebecca.
Okay, right. The National Energy Transition Roadmap, NDTR, in Malaysia, introduced in 2023, is aimed to expedite our nation's shift towards a high-value green economy. This initiative supports the overarching goal of attaining net zero emissions by 2050 with a notable 70% renewable energy generation capacity in the power mix. Meanwhile, in 2021, the Sarawak government launched plans to achieve our high income status via the post-COVID-19 development strategy, or PCDS 2030. This PCDS 2030 has identified renewable energy as our key enabler for Sarawak to reach high income status by 2030, anchored by environmental sustainability and digital economy as our core pillars. Guided by this PCDS, Sarawak Energy leads its energy sector and has been tasked with encompassing the 3 renewable energy targets by the end of this decade, culminating in achieving the Sarawak government goals of 10 gigawatt of predominantly renewable energy by 2030. This key accounts from the alignment with this PCDS 2030 tied with our role as Sarawak primary electricity provider in enabling safe, reliable, and full electricity coverage in the state. We are investing in renewable energies as a key growth driver and aim to maintain at least 60% renewable energy capacity mix by 2030, with this renewable hydropower as our core and accompanied by an increase in alternative renewables. We also reduce these carbon emissions by 600,000 tons per annum by electrifying our Sarawak's mobility fleet by 2030 and achieve more than 15% income through foreign markets, which includes pursuing power exports. The Sarawak Energy Transitions Policy, or SETP, which charts a bold course toward a low carbon economy by scaling, previous slide, by scaling up renewables. Previous slide. Yeah. Promoting innovations and enabling new green industries. It provides structures, pathways to achieve net zero ambitions through the renewable expansions, low carbon solutions such as hydrogen and carbon capture, and enhance the energy efficiency. SETP also drive energy diversifications, combining hydropower, solar, and other renewables with the modern grid system to ensure a clean, resilient energy mix. By mobilizing this green investment and introducing market tools like renewable energy certificates, RECs, SETP attracts capital, creates quality jobs, and strengthens Sarawak's position in the global renewable market. Okay, next slide. We also actively enhancing our grid interconnectivity and establishing cross-border power offtake agreements within Malaysia and other Asian nations to facilitate the sale of our renewable energy. Aligned with this vision to build a robust and interconnected Borneo power system that serves as a building block for the broader ASEAN power grid, our existing interconnection with the West Kalimantan and Sabah demonstrate the viability of cross-border power trade in Borneo. Active discussion with Brunei are also underway to expand interconnections, enhancing grid reliability, flexibility, and regional energy security. Once realized, the Borneo grid will enable this multi-directional flow of clean energy, supporting industrial growth, decarbonization, and shared economic benefits across the region. This integrated grid infrastructure will also strengthen Sarawak's position as a strategic green energy hub, linking ASEAN's energy transition ambitions. Through these efforts, we look into reinforcing our roles as a regional renewable energy powerhouse and battery of ASEAN in support of the realization of ASEAN power grid and ongoing cross-border interconnection initiatives. The combination of all these policies enables supporting the low carbon, sustainable renewable energy, along with the potential for future power export, enhance the attractiveness of developing pump storage hydropower projects in Sarawak. The pump storage hydropower projects utilizing Pakun and Murum reservoirs offer a very practical solution for a swift and economic implementation in pursuing of these energy transition objectives. Right. Thanks.
Thank you, Colin. And sorry, Tony. So over to Colin, as Australia is currently seeing a renaissance of pump storage hydropower interests due to the very large installation of solar across the national electricity markets. This is also following the statewide blackouts in South Australia in 2016, and the Snowy 2.0 pump storage project was revived by the Commonwealth government. So when completed, the Snowy Cascade will be one of the largest pump storage projects in the world. But while some states have pursued policies to support pump storage hydropower development, there have not been that many other pump storage projects in other states. So to support this, and especially technologies that may have struggled in liberalized electricity markets. The question then is, Colin, how can you tell us how Hydro Tasmania works to support these policy changes in Australia, and what are the latest plans that you have to develop?
Thank you, Bente. Could I have next slide, please? Next slide, please, Rebecca. Thank you. So for those maybe not familiar with Australian geography, Tasmania is the island state just to the south of mainland Australia. Hydro Tasmania is a government-owned business enterprise. We have 30 hydropower stations, including 2 large storages. a gas-fired generator, and interest in wind farms as well. Next slide, please. So we began looking at pumped hydro options in around about 2018. That was shortly after the Snowy project was announced. We desktop studies produced about 14 initial options across the state, which we later narrowed to 3 candidate locations and eventually landed on Sathana pumped hydro as our preferred site in 2020. And really what makes that our preferred site for pumped hydro development in the state is a number of key features which are important, I guess, anywhere you're developing pumped hydro. And that is favorable head to storage connection distance ratio, relatively simple tunneling work. What we can take advantage of at Sathana is that the lower storage is built as an existing hydropower storage. There's already hydropower activity in the area. There's low community and environmental impacts, and it's close to transmission lines. At the moment, it's proposed as a 750 megawatt plant with 20 hours of storage. Could I have the next slide, please? This is just obviously a map of the proposed works. So as you can see there, Lake Sathana already exists. That's the lower storage. We would build a Turkey Nest dam, which is the bottom left of your picture there. What I quite like about this is that it shows there's an existing transmission line. That transmission line is so close to where we want to build the power station that it's already going. We'll have to move it because it goes through the proposed site of the storage. There's about 3.5 kilometers of tunneling proposed for this pumped hydro site, obviously with a new switchyard and connection to the local grid. The work to get us from 14 sites to 3 and now to 1 was supported by the Australian Renewable Energy Agency. That's an Australian government body which provides matched funding to assist in the renewable energy transition the country is going through and help with sort of early stage development of projects. What we also see in Australia, I guess, is it's come from a coal-heavy grid where coal used to represent about 80% of generation. That's rapidly being replaced by wind and solar, and there is this need for storage, both shallow, medium, and deep. So there's broad recognition that pumped hydro will be a key part of Australia's energy mix going forward. But as Bente noted, it's still proving very difficult to actually progress projects to sort of final investment decision stage and then getting them commissioned. Thanks. I think you're on mute, Bente.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Colin. I was trying to ask you as a follow-up to this, would you be able to describe a bit more what the policies currently under consideration in Australia could potentially enable these developments?
Thanks. Yeah, if we can move to the next slide, please. So I mentioned there's this recognized need for investment in pumped hydro, and Matteo's presentation a moment ago was great in that talking about the setting of targets is an important part in pumped hydro development. What we have in Australia is every 2 years the system operator produces a plan of likely future generation and storage developments, and then the transmission needed to support the grid in that case. And that's called the integrated system plan. And that graphic on the right is taken from that. And it really shows there's this enormous uptake of wind and solar expected over the next couple of decades as coal's role in the grid diminishes. Demand's also expected to grow. Some of that is driven by electrification, EVs, predicted data center growth, and then some sort of green hydrogen production. We've also got some technical challenges in Australia because we're moving from a summer peaking system where the real challenge is we're having enough megawatts available for very hot evenings in the summer to a system that will be most vulnerable during winter events, and particularly lulls in wind and solar generation, which could last for many hours, sometimes days, or the best part of a week. So the integrated system plan, the latest one, forecasts a need for 13 gigawatts of what they're calling deep or long duration storage. So that's greater than 12 hours. And of that, around about 6 gigawatts is new pumped hydro storage. Next slide, please. Where we're at currently is there's 3 pumped storage hydro facilities operational, but those were built many years ago by governments. As noted, Snowy 2 is a very significant pumped hydro site at 2.2 gigawatts and 160 hours. That's currently under construction, and that's being built by the Australian government itself. There are many proposed sites in development, but as I said, reaching financial close is really the challenge, and Hydro Tasmania has Savannah as one of those. The challenge we see from a policy and regulatory perspective is that the Australia's national electricity market, the name is an energy-only market, so there's no separate capacity payment. Your payment for capacity effectively comes from volatility in pricing. So it can go from minus $1,000 a megawatt hour to positive $20,000 a megawatt hour in 5-minute intervals. And that causes demand and retailers and market participants to enter into financial contracts with each other to hedge that risk. And through those contracts, you get payment for capacity in some form. But really the question is the current design enough to incentivize investment in pumped storage hydro? Another challenge is that we have a market price cap which is dropped after 8 hours. So 8 hours of high prices or a week of moderate prices will drop the maximum price in Australia to about $600. And that really is a bit of a disincentive to invest in any storage or capacity which is long duration or lasts more than that 8 hours of high prices. So a few government policies. I'd note that figure 20 in the bottom right there really shows all the blue bars are investment that's occurred, I guess, in the last 10, 15 years there. And all of that has been progressed with some form of policy or government support. And that really shows that it's hard to get anything up commercially on its own at the moment. The top right is what's been identified in Australia as the tenor gap. And I don't imagine this is unique to Australia, but effectively, if you're building new generation or storage plant, you want to lock in revenue for a large number of years, let's say 15 years. But buyers, whether they're industrial customers or retailers servicing households, they tend to want to contract much shorter. So this gap from kind of 3 to 15 years is what there is a large call for government policies to fill. Next slide, please. So we've got ARENA, which provides grants to help projects get towards final investment decisions. We've got a thing called the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. Again, it's an Australian government body which can provide low interest capital for renewable and zero emissions technologies. And we've had the Capacity Investment Scheme, which was announced in 2022, which was a kind of cap and floor underwriting model introduced again by the Australian government. The challenge there is that that has to date seemed to favour technologies that are available quickly and can be quickly built and deployed. And that's really because it was targeting an energy mix at 2030, when pumped hydro investments are really talking about what's needed in a decade's time, in the 2040s, and to get Australia towards a net zero energy mix. So now we have a proposal for an energy services entry mechanism, an ESIM. That is linked to the identification of the tenor gap that I mentioned, and it's aiming to offer long-term contracting for new developments against future market prices. But there remains this challenge of how do you really value the long duration aspect of pumped hydro and the kind of extra system resilience it brings when it's available. Thanks.
I think you bring up a very interesting point there, because I also observed that there are other regions in the world that experience these lulls in wind and solar that can also be sustained for very long durations. And this also means that the power systems in other countries and regions also need to explore these long-term solutions for energy storage. And I think that this is where hydropower and also pumped storage hydropower comes in with a unique capability, because it can really balance the variability by changes in the weather and hydrological flow. It can store energy in reservoirs for a very long time. It has a very high capacity. And then thirdly, it is also dispatchable when you need it. So I think it's very interesting to follow up and also to explore more in detail what you present here as your last point, with how you can use energy services and how you can enable those through to policies and market remuneration mechanisms that you're seeking to do here. I observed that you set a duration here for more than 8 hours. I know that other regions are looking at different time caps, but it's I think this is a discussion that we will continue to have and see in many regions across the globe in the future. So by that, I think that I would like to ask Matteo to come in and to allude a bit more towards why governments should allow changes to support pumped storage hydropower developments.
Yes, thank you, Bente, and thanks, Colin and Tony, for the very interesting messages and presentation. Well, I think that it's coming more and more evident, and I hope that this is a message that is well understood by the people that is following today this webinar, that developing pumped storage, it's a piece of large infrastructure upon which you can really build the future energy system of a country, or even a group of countries, because this asset can be developed in a way that often benefits not only one single country, but can operate across cross-border and provide their services to a broader region as well. These are therefore assets that are very difficult to value. I mean, all the work that a pumped storage plant will effectively, and the benefits effectively will provide to a society, cannot enter in a financial model, and cannot necessarily be captured when assessing the project from a financial perspective. But also because some of these risks, and therefore, let's say, if when we have these huge benefits, then means that also part of the risk that this asset and the developer and the financiers face when they approach this project and they work on this project, it's beyond their reach. And it's further highlighting how the role of government is essential in making sure that this type of pumped storage in general get developed and move towards a reach FID and then enters into operation. It's I would say it's a strategic choice. It's a choice that required therefore support. One of, as I said before, and as we said, the combination of high capex, high capital need, and when we speak about high capex, let's always remember we're speaking about an infrastructure that lasts 100 years.
when we build pump storage, when we build hydropower, is the so-called forever technology, right? It's not something that you install now and for the next decade you might have a service and then you have to reinstall it again because you reach the end of life. You're literally building up a piece of infrastructure that will last for such a long period of time that will benefit generations and generation after that. Governments are therefore not only need to take a role because they are perfectly placed to hedge some of this risk, but I think they have the duty to take a role in this case. It's such a strategic piece of element and development. Most of these risks often that government can take upon really is on the commercial side of this infrastructure. We need to forecast prices for such a long period of time. Payback, it will happen after 2 decades. And governments and society can work to absorb and mitigate part of that financial risk, introducing specific mechanism that perhaps limit introduce a cap and a floor to the margin that a project could generate over time, thinking in terms of more assets that are operated on a market basis. But also when it comes to more vertical integrated structure of an energy system, we can think of specific fees and making sure that there are allowances to always sufficiently support financially the project and increase the bankability, reduce the credit risk. I think that when we manage to reduce that that element of revenue when we provide revenue visibility to this infrastructure, we always bring the project very close to final investment decision automatically.
I think the complexities around the establishing and securing the financial liability and also the modeling of both the economics surrounding that, it's very important to evolve a bit more in the future. So what I observe is that there are many markets across the world that have developed remuneration mechanisms tailored for the ancillary markets. And that also means that they create incentives to support a power system on a short duration of the time scale. So for seconds and up to a minute. However, what we also observe is that there is an increasing need to look at these different mechanisms in terms of beyond that minute and to the hour, to the peaking operation, and then also to be able to sustain the power system for longer duration if there is a lull in wind or solar generation and so on. So I think that it is definitely challenging to evaluate the bankability of pumped storage hydropower. And I was curious to turn it over to Tony again and to understand a bit better on how the development of a pumped storage hydropower in a vertically integrated power system is and how you experience it, and what are the main challenges and what policy interventions could help bridge the gaps that you experience with this work?
Yeah, basically the financial risk is the main considerations to make any project feasible. In Malaysia as a whole, policy of these energy storage and tariff structures are still evolving. Developers and utilities recognize the needs of energy storage to support variable renewable energy integrations and grid flexibility. But the grid access rules and compensations mechanism for energy storage participation are not yet fully standardized. For the vertical integrated power utility in Sarawak, for us, Sarawak Energy, the competitive and uniform tariff structure is implemented to encourage increased investment without applying any differential tariffs. There is no separate market to reward any ancillary services from this flexibility, supply reliability, and security offered by this energy storage. The principal challenge lies in this establishing a market mechanism or policy framework that effectively monetize and compensates pumped storage operators. Introduction of an energy storage tariff will be an important next step to expedite the implementation of this pumped storage hydropower. This approach will facilitate greater integration of variable renewable energy, VRE, through a coordination with the pump storage hydropower. Energy storage solutions can be deployed to address the intermittency generation patterns of VRE sources, ensuring supply reliability at an agreed upon tariff. Significant efforts have undertaken to develop comprehensive carbon tax framework. The full implementation of these carbon tax credits has this potential to incentivize pump storage hydropower as well, thereby reducing dependence on the fuel-based energy generations. And of course, cross-border energy export is currently an attractive proposition that it enables neighboring countries to monetize excess power generated in the region. Creation of this ASEAN market aggregator that can manage bi or multilateral power trading framework will facilitate the cross-border green energy exports and meet the market demands. Next slide. Okay, in solar energy, we are currently having this feasibility study for pump storage hydropower between Paku Murum Reservoir as well in this Padawan region. With the hope that all these policy interventions, if any of it happens, the development of this pump storage hydropower in Sarawak will become very attractive and will justify any call for expedited implementation. Right, thanks.
I think that it's very interesting to have this discussion today, because we are also talking about and hearing the need to extract and optimize the use of hydropower and pump storage hydropower and the flexibility it provides. And this flexibility means that it will be turned on and off at more frequent intervals. It means also that you are designing a plant that is focusing a bit more on providing services that not necessarily mean electricity generation. However, from a financial and economic perspective, electricity generation is the largest component of the revenue. So I was kind of curious to hear a bit more from Colin here on how Hydro Tasmania works with addressing this gap in expectations of what services the pump storage is expected to deliver, how that affects the financial viability of the project, and how they use this information to develop your projects.
Thanks. I guess if I refer back maybe to the slide I have on why Sathana has become our preferred project, it was extensive work across the state of Tasmania to identify projects, really narrowed it down to Sathana for a number of key reasons. And it really was the existing lower storage reservoir, the short tunneling distance, proximity to transmission lines, and then a key one being sort of low community and environmental impacts. And those studies really were about reducing the risks. As has been noted, pump storage hydro developments face a number of challenges, and your first, I guess, step in identifying a good candidate site is looking for one that you have sufficient confidence you can develop, and that the risks are manageable across some of those key aspects. Another, I guess, challenge facing Hydro Tasmania with the development of this site is that the Tasmanian system, as I noted earlier, we have 30 hydropower stations, 2,200 megawatts of capacity. So Tasmania as a state is not facing the same challenge as Australia, as the mainland Australia, let's say. Mainland Australia has been dependent on coal generation and gas for sort of peaking services, and it's moving away from those. So it needs to fill the gaps that wind and solar won't naturally provide. Tasmania doesn't really have those problems. We can utilize our existing hydropower assets, repower, reinvest, and modernize them to be more flexible for the future system. But really, the reason we would build a pumped hydro site in Tasmania is to support the mainland. And to do that, we need further interconnection. So there's existing interconnection between Tasmania and the mainland of 500 megawatts, but there are proposals and development underway to increase that by 750 megawatts, and then a further second cable, or in this case, it will be the third cable ultimately, of another 750 megawatts after that. So one of the key challenges in financing is that the customers we would be supporting and the energy risks we would be addressing are actually in a different state in a different part of Australia to where the generation asset is located. So it's not Tasmania solving a Tasmanian problem, it's Tasmania supporting mainland states as they transition their energy sector. We've done a number of reliability studies, I guess, for Savannah and showing the gaps that they address, and it's really around lulls in wind and solar generation and potential high impact, low probability events. So events that might only happen every few years, in fact, potentially, but where low renewable generation coincides with asset outages or problems with their mainland transmission network. So certainly financial viability of projects, we have a locational challenge, but we have a really good project. I think in Australia, there's this recognized need to invest in pumped hydro, but everyone is kind of waiting on the coal generation assets closing at the moment, and the schedule for those assets to exit the market remains somewhat uncertain. So it's difficult to build replacement assets ahead of time, even where that might be to the benefit of energy consumers in the long run.
I think that's interesting to see. So I think I would like to address this question also to you, Colin, but I think, Tony, if you can comment after, it would be good. So what do you see the ideal role for pumped storage hydropower be? Is it purely a commercial asset, or is it in providing these regulated services like energy services for other needs for our customers? Colin, if you could come in first.
Sure. I think we would like to develop Savannah as a commercial asset. The current energy market design in Australia with prices being capped after 8 hours really means there isn't that much of an incentive to invest in the long duration capacity and storage it provides. So there's a challenge there, and I think that recognizing the resilience and the reliability benefits of pumped hydro in a different way is what needs to be explored in Australia. We had a report produced for the Australian government just before Christmas, which spoke about strategic reserves. And really that was, in many ways, talking about the role of gas in the system in Australia, that there would still be gas generation available to plug gaps. But equally, we see it as, we believe strategic reserves is a way that, or certainly I believe that strategic reserves is a way that hydropower and pumped hydro assets should be seen. And where there's incentive to, hold extra energy in storage, hold water in dams available for generation, that needs to be valued differently, because the energy only market we have isn't really able to do that at the moment.
And Colin, if you would like to come in from the perspective of Sarawak, is there an opportunity, if you see it like that in the future, to also develop pumped storage hydropower in a commercial asset. I think that we are aware that it's a very regulated system, and it might then have a different perspective from you.
Calling for me,
If you
Tony?
want to come, yeah,
Oh,
yes,
for
please.
calling. Oh, sorry. Can you repeat the question? Sorry, I didn't really got.
Yes, so I was interested to hear from you as well. Do you perceive that there is an opportunity to, or an interest to develop pumped storage hydropower as pure commercial assets, given where you are now on what you see and expect are the changes in your systems for the future?
Yeah, for us as power utilities, we do hope we can develop it as commercials, but at this moment, the commercial this energy storage, I mean, the tariff frameworks is not there for us to utilize. So we are looking into more of supporting our current assets to ensure that the integrities, the reliabilities, and the performance of our assets is getting better. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that just wraps up the panel discussions a bit, but I think it also demonstrates that when everyone are looking at developing the policy or creating these types of enabling environment for developing projects like this, it is also on the basis of the context that they're working in. So in the countries and in the regions. And that's why it's an opportunity to then tailor the policies and regulatory framework to address these needs, but then follow up that with tailoring the projects to address the needs as well. I think that we are going to turn it over now to the next step in our webinar and open up the floor for our questions from our audience. And we have already received a couple. So I'm going to start by going a bit more into depth on financing and investment incentives. And one of the questions that we did receive is alluding to the high upfront capital cost for hydropower. And the question is, which incentives, such as viability gap funding, tax credits, or other policy instruments, are most effective in closing the investment gap for pumped storage hydropower projects? And I think I first would like to ask Matteo to come in with the perspective from the IHA, and then we can ask for Colin or Tony.
Sure. Thank you, Bente, for it's a very valid question. And but I'm sorry in having to answer in a way that I hope doesn't sound vague, but it really always depends on what is the circumstance and what is the environment in which we are trying to develop, what is the current existing market structure. We have seen, for instance, in certain jurisdiction where form of cap and floor mechanism or have been introduced with great success. Obviously, cap and floor can only be successfully introduced in those markets where there is a spot price, where there is a wholesale market, and pump storage is let free to commercially operate in that wholesale market, and helps basically financiers and developer to understand what is the minimum margin that will be achieved over a long period of time. That should be typically is the floor, and it is usually revised every couple of years, so it's not a daily or monthly revision. It's usually there is a period of time through which the pump storage asset is let free to operate, and at the end of that period, the overall margin is analyzed, and the performance on a gross margin between the price at which electricity has been bought and the price at which electricity has been sold is assessed. But obviously there is also a floor above. So there is a cap, above, there is a floor at the bottom and a cap above. It means basically when the plant has then the gross margin of the plant moved above that cap, the benefits are, or the extra revenue or portion of that extra revenue or the extra margin is split with society, with the government. Is given back to society, and it helps, for instance, to financing additional infrastructure that can be built in the future. So I think the conclusion really goes down to the fact that I don't think there is a one solution that can fix them all. It's always about understanding what market we are operating in. What does it mean to operate commercially? Does it exist a spot market? Is the plan destined to work on a spot market, or is a fully regulated fee structure? And at that point, calibrating well the type of supporting mechanisms that need to be introduced. What we have clear is that we understand well what these are meant to do. Are really meant to help providing that revenue visibility, that secure and reinforce the economic model that today we are preparing, but for at the same time forecasting for the next 3-4 decades, and making sure it's somehow reliable. Our forecast is reliable, and the model is created and used to finance the project is reliable. I hope this answers the question.
I think it does. And if you are to suggest one mechanism, Colin, that you also think would be most effective in closing the investment gap, what would that be?
That's a very challenging question. I think there's been a lot of debate in Australia about whether we should have moved to a capacity market over the years. So, I mean, really, we have this energy-only market, and I didn't go into much detail earlier, but the price can go as high as $20,000 a megawatt hour. But after 8 hours of high prices, the maximum price is then lowered to $600. And what that means is market participants only really have an incentive to hedge against 8 hours worth of risks. So when they contract with each other, it's really expectations of short spikes in energy prices, not very prolonged ones. And that means that pumped hydro really misses out on this value of the long duration and the system resilience it provides. So for me, when pumped hydro projects compete against an 8-hour battery, for example, what we're seeing in Australia is the ease of financing and building an 8-hour battery means that on a competitive basis, the 8-hour battery is more likely to be the one to support, to attract underwriting or government support. But we're not really comparing apples with apples there. We're comparing an 8-hour battery with potentially a 20-hour pumped hydro site or something else. And it's the lack of recognition for the additional benefits pumped hydro provides, that deep storage, that longevity of capacity and the flexibility. That's the key challenge. So I think Australia needs a way to better value that and recognize that the reliability risks that we're moving towards aren't the hot summer evenings where the grid's at peak capacity. It's the lulls in wind and solar where we're going to have an energy deficit. And that's really the role that hydropower and pumped hydro needs to play and needs to be valued appropriately in.
I think that's very interesting points that you do have there. I think we are going to turn it over to another question that came in, and it relates more to regulatory frameworks and how that can potentially affect project timelines. So we have a question related to what are the main regulatory delays in licensing pump storage hydropower, and can closed loop or streamlined approval processes help shorten development timelines? I think we first to start with Tony, if you have any insights you would like to share on this.
Talking about all this regulatory, is for us, it's more about how we sell our energies, because for us, we are more on the selling capacities. We are most on the best loads. So if there is any mechanism or regulatory, it will be related to this, how we strengthen our grid to ensure that all these securities, any power purchaser from us, they are going to get these confirms capacities they're going to get all the times. And this power pump storage will be able to provide this insurance to them. So maybe sometimes in the future, they may be able to buy this capacity from this pump storage that pump storage can afford as an insurance policy for them to get this power all the time, instead of being asked to curtail due to some problem with the grids or some assets. So this will be some things that is in the futures that we are looking at. There's a possibility, but of course all these will need this our boss, basically our government, to agree to. So and these are a lot of discussions, a lot of potential ways to look at, and yeah, it's a long work in progress, and many potentials from this pump storage, ancillary services, tariff. And basically, there is no guideline in the world somewhere how people price these ancillary services, because it's the value is there, but nobody can price it. So this is a lot of challenges that we are facing. Yeah.
And I think that a part of the question here was also related to if there is an opportunity to find more streamlined approval processes that can help shorten these development timelines. And Matteo, do you have any examples, or how you work with someone who have identified an optimal way of streamlining processes, or are these processes in constant discussion in your experience there?
Yeah, this is a big topic of conversation, obviously. Always, Bente, agree with this. It's what we can say is that we have seen jurisdiction, though, at least trying to put time frames in place, which is already something really relevant, meaning that once we submit for an authorization or a permitting process, there is a visibility of how long the process will take, how many revisions, how many objections the project might receive before getting a yes or a final yes or a final no. Having this type of forward visibility is already crucial for developers, because at least they can start planning for a worst case scenario, which sounds really negative, but having somehow a bottom line how long that process should be in worst cases helps planning ahead and helps creating financial models as well. The issue, as we have seen, is that in some jurisdiction, when these measures are not in place, project might end up in a permitting and regulatory labyrinth where they end up being rolled and rolled for years, and developers get discouraged. It's a cost. The longer the development take place, the longer the development period, the longer the permitting period, the higher the cost for a developer, the higher the cost for our financiers, but also the higher the cost for our society. Because if the project arrives at the end, all that accumulated cost will then become system costs for the consumers. So what I can say is that obviously as IHA, we are the voice of sustainable hydropower, and we are firmly believing and strongly believing that the only hydropower that should move forward is the sustainable one. There are protocols and tools that can be used to assess the sustainability of these plants. We invite, for instance, all developers to adopt the sustainability standard in their practices, which helps because it forces identifying criticalities from day one and helps obviously in dealing with all the with the permitting process that will need to be navigated by the developers in a subsequent moment. So I hope this responds to the question. I also heard another little element at the beginning, if you don't mind me adding, about closed-loop pump storage. And I'm really also open to hear more from Colin and Tony as practitioners what they think about that. But from our perspective, we see a lot of interest in closed-loop pump storage also because of that element. Often closed-loop pumps don't rely necessarily on dams built on river, or on substantial river at least. They are mostly refilled through a small streams of water, so they have a smaller impact in terms of environmental flow consideration and impact on river connectivity, which should be considered. And we invite governments to make sure that they consider this element and they well understand the difference between type of plants and type of designs.
So also, I think that those are the elements that I also observe when we are in dialogue with our clients that are exploring closed loop systems. And there's also opportunities to configure them and also construct the reservoirs in different manners. And even though it is a closed loop system, what I also find interesting with pump storage hydropower is that the main mode of recharging your energy storage is often connected to hydrology. But you have the added advantage of being able to recharge that energy storage as well with pumping water back up again, that also have this different dynamics when it comes to the natural flows of rivers and so on. And I think that from the World Bank Group's perspective, of course, we also support our clients in developing these different projects in a responsible manner that also takes into consideration environmental and social aspects and thorough and really rigorous assessments of these potential impacts. I think we have time for one last questions, maybe two, but we did have a quick question here from one of our audience asking what types of support and resources are available for countries to enable pump storage hydropower projects. And I think I would start by responding to this one. So from the World Bank's perspective and the World Bank Group's perspective, we support all phases in developing pump storage hydropower. So that also includes supporting our clients in the phase where they're looking at the policy, regulatory, or the market mechanisms. We also recognize that some of the discussions today that relates to ancillary market designs and so on are often tailored for liberalized and open market solutions, while we work with our clients in countries that are under regulated market solutions. So I think that one of my goals with having these types of discussions on this platform is also to enable us to come together to have these types of discussions, to learn and draw an experience from others. And then we also encourage those who are interested in pursuing this further and also pursuing support from the World Bank Group to reach out. I think that we can also include one more question here on the social acceptability of projects. So as I said, and also as Matteo said, it is important to seek a social acceptability for the project at an earlier stage. And these are often reflected in all of the different policies that we also support working with, as well as the World Bank Group's policy on these aspects. So the socioeconomic benefits for hydropower and pump storage hydropower development can be quite large. We have a publication available from ESMAP on unveiling socio-economic benefits from hydropower that will really encourage everyone to also refer to. But that report also addresses this need to explore this beyond the electricity generation and beyond that. So my question is to Tony first, because you did address that bit in your presentation. I was wondering if you can expand a bit on it. How do you also work with obtaining this social acceptability at early stages, but also throughout the project phases?
Yeah. Sarawak, we subscribe to these San Jose's declarations. Basically, all our hydropowers have to be sustainable, and of course, through this, we will screen our projects. We try to avoid any environmentals. We will make sure all our implementations follow this SSS guideline. And with all this, we are able to address, we try to avoid anything that is going to affect the peoples. And at the same time, we are looking into all the project benefits that we can create out of all these renewable energies. We try to screen through everything in the upfront. So during the implementation phases of these projects, we can put in we identify these variable and the environmentals and the social components of all these project areas, and then we try to conserve it all the way until the end of the projects. So basically, step by steps, we try to protect the futures and try to reduce all these impacts from the implementations of our projects. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tony, and also thank you for contributing to today's webinar, and same to Colin and Matteo. I really appreciate the fact that we are able to shed some light on this discussion from different perspectives and also with different experiencing working with developing pump storage hydropower across the globe. And by that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Jessica Percy, to offer some closing remarks, and I hope to see you next time.
Great. Thank you, Bente. And a very sincere thanks to all of our speakers today, including Demetrius, Matteo, Tony, and Colin, for hosting a discussion that I found rich and very practical. So as Bente mentioned, from ESMAP and the World Bank Group's perspective, the question of how to enable pump storage hydropower across these different markets, institutional and kind of economic contexts is really central to the work we do. Now, as power systems integrate higher shares of variable renewable energy, the challenge isn't whether long-term or long-duration energy storage is needed, but the policy design, right? Creating the frameworks that allow long-duration storage to be developed and financed. So realizing the potential of pump storage hydropower in modern power systems really depends on deliberate policy and regulatory choices. A few messages stood out clearly for me from today's discussion. First, policy and regulatory frameworks matter just as much as engineering and the technical side. So whether power markets are liberalized or they're vertically integrated, pump storage hydropower rarely fits neatly into kind of existing market designs. And there's a strong need for governments to establish clear policy frameworks, targets, integrated power system plans that reflect the full value that these assets can provide. Second, financial viability really remains one of the biggest hurdles, not, of course, because pump storage hydropower lacks value, but rather because that value is really difficult to monetize under current arrangements. So we heard concrete examples that have kind of underscored the importance of providing long-term revenue visibility for project developers through things like revenue stabilization mechanisms, establishing ancillary markets, transparent permitting and licensing processes, and kind of these other instruments that can help to recognize the full energy, water, and societal benefits that pump storage hydropower can provide. Last, kind of a lesson I pulled from today's conversation is that early and sustained engagement between governments, utilities, system operators, project developers is essential. The experiences from Malaysia and Tasmania that our speakers highlighted really shows that progress depends on dialogue, coordination, and more at a higher level, kind of building the shared understanding of the role that pump storage hydropower is expected to play in the power systems of the future. So before we close, I'd like to announce our next webinar in this hydropower knowledge series, which will be held on May 20th. So this session will focus on jobs in hydropower, kind of how policy and planning decisions shape socioeconomic outcomes over the lifetime of a project and can contribute to a green economy. And we'll be sharing details on this next session within the next few weeks. We really hope you'll be able to join us. And with that, thank you again to our speakers from IHA, from Sarawak Energy, Hydro Tasmania. Bente, thank you for the lovely moderation, and to all of the participants here for joining and contributing to a thoughtful dialogue. We look forward to continuing the conversation on May 20.